I have 3 times burned into my brain. 0217, 0341, 0409. If I fall asleep at all, I pop awake at one of those numbers like someone's nudging my shoulder from the other side of the dark. I didn't used to be like this. I slept. Then I met a man who made a promise to his country in 1982 and decided to break it with me in the middle of the Nevada desert. He told me we'd be in and out before dawn. He told me there would be a phrase, 6 words, that would keep the worst of it at bay. He told me to remember a patch he pressed into my palm. I still have the patch. I still don't sleep. If you came for proof or a clean conclusion, you won't get it here. What I have is a night, a set of names I won't repeat, and a corridor underground where reflections don't line up with the living. What I have is a man with lungs that rattled when he laughed, a coffee-stained napkin full of numbers, and a camera that made a sound I can hear even over silence. Wreck. He picked the diner. They always pick the diner. On the US 93, between nowhere and the next nowhere, neon fizzing over a flock of moths, trucks idling out back like snoring animals. I took the booth under a clock that was stuck at 1:52 and pretended not to notice when the waitress filled my mug the second my hand nudged the handle. "Refills are on me tonight," she said. She did not say why. He was late, then perfectly on time, the sort of delay that makes you scan the parking lot twice. He walked like someone who'd learned to carry rank in his shoulders and never quite put it down. Back straight, chin level, right knee a fraction stiff from some forgotten eject, or maybe just years of Air Force boots. He introduced himself by rank and first name only, Major Tom. He smiled at the joke he didn't mean. The handshake lasted exactly 1 second. I counted. "This will be a conversation and a drive," he said, settling into the vinyl like he'd been briefed to. "If you want to record anything, you wait until I say the word Mirage. Not before. Not after. And if I die in a year, this goes out. If I last 2, you wait 2. Do we have an agreement?" We did, on a paper placemat with a maze printed in blue and a dotted line for kid's signature. I asked him why now. "Because that clock is wrong," he said, nodding at the diner wall. "And mine is running out." He told me he'd flown F-111s when they were new enough to feel like cheating. Nellis AFB had been his orbit, daylight exercises, night approaches, red flag sorties that turned the desert into a chessboard of live fire and radio chatter. He'd been good enough to be forgettable in the way the best are. Everything by the book, nothing strange until it was. In 1982, he said, there'd been a recovery exercise that wasn't. A diversion flight that ended not at Nellis, but farther north at a field without a name. "We didn't call it Groom Lake," he said. "We didn't call it anything. Why are you telling me?" I asked. "Because you say I don't know more than anyone I've watched," he said. "Because you don't leap. And because I'm tired of pretending the weirdest thing that ever happened to me was just a radome in a storm." He slid a small object across the table. A fabric patch. Black on black, edges frayed enough to say it had been unpicked from something and pocketed in a hurry. A shape, triangle over circle, was stitched in matte thread barely darker than the backing. On the bottom border, 4 tiny bumps in the stitching broke the seam's rhythm like skipped heartbeats. "You ever sew?" he asked. "Badly." "Good. You'll notice. Those aren't mistakes." The waitress refilled our cups, and he swallowed his coffee like medicine. Then he told me the part that convinced me to follow him. Not the tanks, not the glass, not the room. He said he stood outside while men he knew slipped into different names. It was the way his voice changed around one simple thought. "It didn't fall here," he said, staring at the steam leaking off his mug. It arrived. We left cash that could have paid for 5 breakfasts, walked out into a wind that smelled like metal and dry rain. And I tucked the patch into the small pocket inside my jacket. The one you use for rings and receipts you will later deny. He drove. Of course he drove. The car was clean, too clean, like he'd wiped down surfaces that already gleamed. He didn't look at me as the miles burned under his headlights. He told me a story about chasing a radio echo once, how he and the pilot in the other cockpit called to each other and heard themselves answer before they spoke. He laughed at his own superstition. "You'll want to know why I trust you," he said finally. "I don't. I trust that you won't embellish. I didn't promise anything back. I watched the white lines flick by and thought of that napkin with the numbers, the 4 bumps in the thread. I thought of Arrow 217, though I didn't know it yet, the first new time I would learn. There was no sign. There was a fence that looked like fences look when lawyers have drawn them, and a gap that looked like someone had decided laws could be walked through if you knew which piece of wire didn't matter. We rolled to a stop where the road ended, dust settling around us like we'd driven into a photograph. Off to our right, far enough to make me wonder if my depth perception was off. Light did something light shouldn't do. It held still and hummed without noise. The Major got out, stretched his back until I heard the pop, and walked to a metal post that wasn't one thing or another. He knocked. 3 short, 1 long, 2 short. 3-1-2. Old pilots use their hands when they count rhythm, thumb tapping absently on thigh. He did. 30 seconds later, an industrial platform that looked like it belonged under a freight elevator rose out of the ground with the kind of inevitability that says you were never supposed to see it. No phones below, he said. No signal anyway. Do I need a badge? You already have one, he said, and for a too long second I thought of the patch in my pocket like it had grown teeth. We descended. Sometimes, when people want to convince you a place is normal, they overdo it. Bare concrete, safety stripes, a vocabulary of hazard you learn at airports and forget at home. Non-ionizing hazard, hearing protection required, no loan zone. The fluorescent bulbs had that flicker that makes you blink along. And then the thing that didn't fit, a wall-length mirror that breathed. That's not what it did. Not really. But it's the only word that makes sense now. The surface fogged and cleared with a rhythm that wasn't ours. A half-second beat behind the rise and fall of the Major's chest when he stopped to catch himself, and then not behind anymore. Then behind again, like a DJ working 2 similar tracks slightly out of sync. Is that Mirage? He said softly. Not like a code word, more like he'd stepped on a childhood memory. But I heard it. I heard what he'd asked me to hear. The recorder in my pocket clicked. A little red dot pulsing to itself, and from that moment on, the night had a spine. We walked a corridor labeled S4 in neat stencil. The paint so fresh it made me wonder if someone had touched up the letters for our benefit. Doors sat every 30 feet, each with a small window, each window dark. Equipment slept under covers that made the shapes we're used to seeing, monitors, carts, cabinets, blur at the edges. In the third room on the left, the glass responded when the Major paused. It didn't fog. It got thicker, the way hot air over asphalt makes light look like water. He put his palm on the glass, and a handprint bloomed on the other side, not where his was, not aligned. A breath late. You said you wanted me to say it? I whispered, and I didn't know why I whispered. Why? So there's a record, he said. Because in 1982, the man who told me to keep my mouth shut died 2 months later, and 3 different people put their names on his memo, and you can't subpoena a conscience. Because I think I broke something that was supposed to stay sealed, and I'm not sure if that was wrong. You broke... what? An oath, a door. You pick? He didn't look at me then. He looked at the chair in the center of the room beyond the glass, reclined, leather cracked where a head would rest, straps coiled neatly like belts in a closet. A table to its left, instruments arranged in 12 precise inches, nothing disposable in sight, everything built to be wiped and used again. Who sat there? I asked. No one you'd recognize, he said. And everyone. His laugh ended in a cough. We were told it was debriefing. You've never heard the word sound so clean. There was a second object, bigger than the chair, squat, fused, the opposite of rivets. No seams I could see, only curves that made curves of their own shadows. It was the size of a small truck, but looked not heavy exactly. Like it didn't believe in weight the way we do. We called it the Mirage because it never looked like the same thing twice unless you stopped staring, he said. When we got bored of names, we called it the Thing. And this is what you saw in 1982? No, he said. This is what saw us. Something tapped from the far side of the glass. Once, twice, somewhere in the pattern a mistake happened, or my brain made it. The Major closed his eyes. I realized I was holding my breath and let it out too fast, making the mirror fog on our side belt the rhythm back. Knock it, he said. What? Same as before. I knocked 312 because I am sometimes obedient to the wrong details. The taps came back. No, that's not right. They didn't come back. They were already there, just half a breath late. And because I want this to be rational, I will tell you there were other explanations, speakers and playback and someone behind the glass hired to be a haunting. But I will also tell you that when that not echo happened, my eyes filled and I swallowed a kind of panic I don't have a name for. You forgot the fourth light, the Major said suddenly, intensely, like he was correcting a landing checklist. Say it back to me. I forgot the fourth light. Again. I forgot the fourth light. Again. I forgot the fourth light. The panic receded like a tide that had moved just to show you it could. Somewhere behind the glass, something slightly the shape of a person shifted and froze. The timing slipped back into place and then out again like a pendulum deciding which clock to live in. What does it mean? I asked. The line they gave us if we woke up screaming, he said. It works until it doesn't. He stepped closer to the glass, close enough that his breath would have fogged it if the glass cared. You came here for proof, he murmured, and it was tempting to pretend he meant someone else, someone braver. All I have is a record and a route. Route? He tapped his chest where a patch would go. You'll get it later, he said, and for the first time he sounded tired. Not like a soldier tired at the end of a watch, but like a person whose calendar had been a countdown for too long. There is a trick I learned years ago from a man who carried more cameras than I carry questions. When you can't understand the thing in front of you, narrate the edges. That night, the edges were measurements. The corridor was exactly 312 feet long. The doors were 30 feet apart. The mirror wall ran 48 feet and change. The chair straps were fixed to anchor points at 18-inch intervals. The object in the corner didn't care about inches at all. We stopped in a smaller room where the air tasted like the inside of a coin. The Major pulled a folder from a drawer that unlocked itself with a sound I heard in my teeth more than my ears. Old paper. Old photographs. Some too pristine to be old, and that was the unsettling part. He flipped to one where 3 men posed with the kind of forced casual you get when you've been ordered to look like you wandered past a camera. Uniforms without insignia. Smiles without teeth. On the breast of one, barely visible, that triangle over circle in a contrasting texture that the flash had teased out. You see it? He asked. The emblem? The errors, he said. He produced a small magnifier like a magician, and I leaned. In the bottom border of the patch, the seam had 4 places where the stitching pulled a fraction high. 4 bumps, like a code hidden where only a bored tailor would find it. On the back of the photo, someone had written in pencil what looked like a grocery list but wasn't. 4 pairs of digits in parenthesis. One of them a negative. These are, I started. Coordinates, he said. Not of one place, of 4. You connect them and they draw a line. The line crosses airspace we train in, airspace we deny, airspace we lease to people with more money than scruples. It passes near things we do not talk about on camera. And it goes close enough to a dozen American cities that the average person would tell you the government isn't that reckless. He put the magnifier down. We aren't. I hope we aren't, but I know what we flew over. I know what we carried. Sometimes close is a lie you tell yourself when you want the map to be kinder. Do you want me to show these? I asked. I want you to ask people to find them for themselves, he said. Do not publish numbers. Do not publish gates. Do not send anyone anywhere. But if someone pauses your video and sees what I saw in a frame I cannot unsee, let them draw their own lines. He closed the folder, and the drawer closed itself. I didn't like that. What did you deliver? I asked. Back then. You said it didn't fall here. I delivered a man who wanted to leave this room believing in us, he said. And I delivered myself to a version of me that does not sleep. He smiled without humor. Does that answer your question? It answers a better one I didn't know to ask. We stood at the mirror again, the almost breathing surface holding us like a trick of heat above highways. In the not-quite reflection, my head tilted a fraction after my neck told it to. Behind us, there were shapes that my mind wanted to label as equipment, arms, clamps, until one of them admitted elbow and knee and something like a hand. I know what you want me to say next. You want me to say I saw a face. I didn't. I saw the idea of a face, if faces were described to a sculptor who had never seen one and was working from memory a bit out of time. "Tell me when this began for you," I said. "Tell me the moment." "Not the briefing," he said. "Not the signatures." The moment was a sound. I was at attention, pretending not to itch. Somebody behind me tapped 312 on a table, out of boredom, out of habit. And then something tapped it back 2 beats later from the wrong side of the glass. That was the moment I started to believe two things can share a room without sharing a clock. He paused, eyes on the dark shapes. "We're done here. Already?" "Trust me," he said. And I did, because I'd given him that power when I stepped onto the elevator. On the ride back up, the platform hummed through my bones like a tuning fork someone had opted to hide in me. The night outside had tilted toward morning, the desert speaking in cold. We got in the car. We didn't talk for 5 minutes. Then the major said, "If anyone asks what you saw, you tell them what you felt, not what you think you understood. That's how you keep from lying without telling everything you know." "What do I say about you?" I asked. "Say I'm a man who loved checklists until they failed him," he said. "Say I gave you a phrase that helps when it's early. And say I broke my oath so that I could keep a better one." "To what?" "To the truth that scares us but keeps us decent," he said quietly. "To the idea that if something arrived, we should be the people it deserved to meet. I wish that was the end." We made it back to the diner with time before dawn. The waitress had the same look people get when they know you left and didn't expect you back. The coffee was free again. The jukebox was still off, a row of old hits staring at us like witnesses told to keep quiet. The major took the patch from my jacket, flipped it in his fingers, then slid it back without comment. "Look closely at the border when you get home," he said. "Not just the bumps. The thread color is a half shade off where someone repaired it. That's where the letters are invisible until you scan them. Don't. Just notice. You're talking in riddles. I'm talking like a man whose phone won't stop ringing if he doesn't," he said. "You have the phrase. You have the times. You have the line." He paused. "You also have a choice." "What choice?" "To sleep," he said, using the word the way a doctor does when he's already told you the prognosis. "Or to start waking up at 2:17, 03:41, 4:09. Those times aren't special. They just happen to be when they like to check whether we're still paying attention." He smiled, and it hurt to see. "Say the phrase before bed 3 times. It helps some nights." He left in a car that looked like every car an older man buys because it promises reliability over personality. I watched his taillights shrink and thought of the mirror. I was home by sunrise. I slept for 2 hours and woke at 02:17 the next night, hard in my throat. I said the phrase. It helped. Then it didn't. I tried to reach 2 people he said I could try. One had scrubbed his profile from the internet so thoroughly that old caches had blank spaces where his name should be. The other replied to a careful email with a subject line I've never seen anyone use unironically: "Unsubscribe." No punctuation. No sign-off. Just that. A week later, I went back to the diner. The waitress acted like the refills were still on her. The clock had fixed itself, or someone had finally changed the battery. I asked about the man I'd been with. She looked at my face like she was calibrating me and shrugged. "Lots of majors around here," she said. "Lots of men who tell you the same war twice." In the parking lot, a sedan sat longer than cars sit unless someone wants them to. It wasn't his car, and it was exactly his car. A thin line of dust along the windshield wipers the wind had spared told me it hadn't moved in at least a day. I looked in because humans look in. On the back seat, there was the shadow where a patch had rested, and then not. You can call it pareidolia. You can call it what happens when you want a story to stitch itself neat. I only know that I did not open the door, and I did not tell anyone in the diner. The patch in my jacket suddenly felt warm, then not. I drove home with the urge to pull over 3 times and didn't. That night, I woke at 03:41, then 04:09, then I gave up. By morning, I'd memorized the bumps along the patch border and told myself the thread color was nothing like letters. I told myself I would not scan it, that I would not make anything more visible than it already was. Here's the part where you expect me to ask you to believe me. I'm not asking. I'm asking you to look at the numbers that float up out of the ordinary in your own life when you brush against something you can't name. I'm asking you if you find yourself awake at 0217 to sit with it for a minute before you grab your phone. I'm asking you if you pause this video and count the bumps on the patch and draw your lines. To be careful with the places your lines cross. If you think you see the fourth light in a photo you've seen before, or you notice a seam where seams don't belong, leave a single number in the comments. Just one digit. That's enough. I'll know which part you saw. Other people will too. And if you wake up with your breath half a beat behind the glass, say the words that help until they don't. You forgot the fourth light. You forgot the fourth light. You forgot the fourth light. I hope they work longer for you than they did for me. Epilogue is the wrong word. Nothing ended. That's the truth I owe you. The Major stopped answering messages I never sent. Someone I didn't know asked me in a grocery store line if I liked night driving and then smiled too hard when I said not really. I caught my reflection in a hotel mirror that wasn't angled right and felt seasick watching my eyes look back a fraction late. But here's what I can close. The loops I opened for you, the promises. I told you the times. You have them. 0217, 0341, 04.09. They keep me honest, and most nights, they keep me company. I told you there'd be a phrase. I used it. You heard me use it. It doesn't banish anything. It acknowledges. That might be the point. I told you there'd be a patch. It exists. If you ever handled a unit emblem that felt wrong under your finger, like the stitching had swallowed a message, you already know how something can be hidden in plain thread. I will not reveal the numbers that might live in mine. That is my line, and it's not just for me. I told you I'd heard a knock and knocked back. I did. If you want to call it latency and playback and a room designed to fool, please go ahead. Skepticism is safer armor than whatever I'm wearing now, and I told you a man broke his oath to keep a better one. This is me trying to do the same. I am not telling you to go anywhere. I am not telling you to trespass, to chase lights, to decode patches. I am telling you that on a night when the desert held a breath inside a mirror, I stood with a man who looked like all our fathers and listened to a rhythm that didn't belong to any machine I've ever met. If anything in this made you feel less alone in the strange hours, that's the only proof I can offer. If anything made you curious enough to slow down the frames, follow your own caution. And if you found a fourth light, if you saw it the way he wanted me to see it, leave that one number. I'll read it when I'm up. Odds are I will be.